what I am going to talk about are just an overview of the different types of heat pumps, some of which are ducted, some of which are ductless, and how to choose the system because there's just so many choices, and the process of equipment selection, which to me translates as how to work with the contractor and some key things that you want to look for, so that you not only get a heat pump that matches your house, but that it actually performs the way that you're hoping for. And these kind of systems, they can be, we can do a system that's all electric, or sometimes they're dual fuel, and in describing them, it can hopefully help sort that out too. HVAC is evolving, so.
Can I ask a real basic question? Like,
Yes,
is a
please.
heat pump, does it create heat, but does it also cool?
So, thank you. It is not, I love the name heat pump because they are always pumping heat. So when we need to cool the house, we're pumping heat from inside to outside. And when we want to heat the house, we're harvesting heat from outside and bringing it to the inside. So those of you who have traditional equipment, like an air conditioning system, that is a heat pump. It's a heat pump that half works. So you're pumping heat to the outside, but it doesn't have that reversing valve. And that's what we'll talk about. I used to say that my job was to install fossil fuel burning plants in people's basements, right? And now I am removing exhaust pipes. And of course, we're talking about the exhaust pipe from people's homes, not this local example of the card.
Right.
Although I think our business probably contributed 7 of those in the file. When we look at the home energy, like what our personal footprints are, the home heating is a big piece of this. I mean, we say like 85% of our footprints is our transportation and our water heating and our space heating and cooling. And so 30% of that is what we're talking about now, is the heating and cooling of your house. So this is a really significant factor. And when we're talking about furnaces, we were excited about going from standard efficiency furnaces, which you recognize with the metal flue, to the high efficiency furnaces. So you're going from 80% of the energy in that fuel being converted to heat to now 95, 98%. But it really doesn't get us to where we want to go. When we talk about heat pumps, we are now in a world where now we're using 1/3 of the power because we're not burning the fuel to convert it to heat. We're using our energy to harvest heat that's in the ambient air. And when we think it's cold out, there's still negative. The absolute zero is a few hundred degrees below zero. So when the coldest temperatures that we see around here are still fantastic to harvest a lot of heat and to work really well for heat pumps. This is, to your question, a heat pump is a BTU delivery system, and sometimes we're pushing that heat out to the outside, and sometimes we're pulling it in, but we're always pumping heat. The types of systems, this is an overview. This is if you have a traditional furnace, and then you have an air conditioner, or you have a furnace and a heat pump already, then it's this system over here, this type of system. It has the same parts and pieces, where you have the one box that's the furnace is pushing the air and it has the controls, and then it has an indoor component called a coil and an outdoor condenser. So all heat pump systems that we're going to talk about have indoor and outdoor. And this is all designed to run through your existing ductwork. So it'll be the system that you've already got, very similar. And we have a variety of it where we are taking away the gas burner, getting rid of the exhaust pipe from your house, and going to all electric. And we'll talk about what some of the factors are to consider about whether that's a possibility for you. That makes sense. So we call these systems that have indoor and outdoor because they are split and they're moving some of that heat using refrigerant. We call them split systems, the outdoor and the indoor. And that's why you would also have smaller versions called mini splits. Mini splits is this whole, people are most familiar with the unit that you see up on the wall, and you have the outdoor units that are smaller. They tend to be really quiet. They are on the high end of the efficiency spectrum. So I love mini splits for the right application. Mini splits are, if you use this one on the high wall, or this other picture I have actually works really well. It's more like a radiator style, so it can fit in an attic where there's knee walls and you don't have room to put a nice thing up on your wall. There are half a dozen different shapes and sizes of the indoor piece of those. And outdoors, they tend to be these small boxes or these domino-shaped ones. The garages, big open rooms that I want to condition. I love these for houses that have an upstairs master suite that have lousy ductwork and so they don't cool. Or if I am able to cool that upstairs, it'll turn the downstairs into an ice box. So I can put a supplemental mini split upstairs. So for the right applications, I love this. I'm not a big fan of going into a house and putting these devices all over all the walls and all the rooms. Kind of go off the rails in terms of your efficiency, and it's a mismatch. But in the world of mini splits, we have one-to-ones. So there's one outdoor box connected to one indoor piece, and those I love. They match, right? The performance, the outdoor piece and the indoor piece are perfectly matched. When I have multiple splits, so the multiple heads running off of one outdoor box, it can be a great solution. But now I'm trying to balance the range of what the outdoor unit can deliver with this variety of indoor units. The other big difference in the world of mini splits, or one of the popular types that I like to work with, is instead of indoors having something on your walls, we have ducted versions. So it might be that if you have a medium to smaller house, I'll be looking at, it's a great option to just replace the furnace altogether with an air handler. So an air handler is a box that replaces a furnace. It's a furnace with no burner. It has the radiator to run the refrigerant, and it has the control, but we're not burning gas. And so that could be a ducted mini split. There's a big brother to these. If I have a house that is more complicated, maybe has different thermal zones, or I have sometimes big houses with different people in it that have really different needs, or I just want to have a lot of different control, I do want people to know that there's this whole category of equipment. I call them super splits. The real name for them is VRF, Variable Refrigerant Technology. These are fantastic in terms of I can have a really complex system with a lot of different needs, and if I have the smallest load, one room over here, it's still running in its peak efficiencies, and I can also run a bigger, more complex system and have it be peak. So just want to put out there that there is this whole other type of technology that a lot of people are overlooking in the investigation. Which one? When we choose a heat pump, there are, it can be this 350% efficient, it can have all these really wonderful advantages, but there are also some big caveats to getting the right one and having it work as you want. We need to make sure it's sized properly. The installation, and even just using the right one for the right job, will make sure that it's not like choosing that, where you go and get an appliance and it just says, which efficiency do you want? It needs to be integrated with your house as a system. I want to show here that when I design systems, I design for all the comfort advantages. So I want to have even temperatures through your house. Nice control. You know, I have a lot of conversations about the differences in temperatures between up here and down here. And the interesting thing about the designing of these systems for comfort is it's the exact same list for designing for all the efficiency goals, to have the equipment operate at its highest performance and its quietest and have the most control. And it's all about the slow and steady conditioning. So I want the system to run for a long period of time at a much lower amount and lower temperatures and achieve this deeper comfort. But it's nice that they both, these two end goals are accomplished with the same strategy. Now I'm getting a little bit into the process of choosing the heat pump. When I go out on appointments, the first step I do is I'll look at the equipment and I'll talk with you about how your existing equipment works, but I'll also be doing a calculation of what does the house need? And when I say what does the house need, I'm looking at the extremes. On the coldest day of the year, how much heating does it need? On the hottest day, what will it take to cool it? So how much heat do we need to pump in, or how much heat do we need to pump out? And these are not the what you really need most of the time. This is just the bookends. This is a lot of these things that I'm talking about, the process here it applies just, if you were doing a traditional system and you weren't considering heat pumps, this is still the same process, right? You want to figure out the smallest piece of equipment that will work for you. And you want to think about what can we do to make the house more efficient so that we can use smaller equipment. But I love that talking about heat pumps really focuses us on these things. And they can be really basic, like are my ducts connected or are they all leaking? But for heat pumps in particular, airflow is really critical. What we're doing is we're using refrigerant to move the heat on the one side of the system between the indoor and the outdoor equipment. And that stuff is like a sponge for heat. So, and then in the house, we're using air to move heat around. It's being pulled into the big return grills and then it comes out through these supply registers. So what I need is that energy to make the jump from the air to the refrigerant or vice versa. And in order for that to work, there has to be really good airflow through the house. So when I have clogged filters, these are really going to, it's going to affect the performance of your heat pump. If I have systems, I put these pictures of the garden hose and the straws just to let people know it's really simple, the concept of, it's not like an extension cord where if you plug in one end and you plug in the other, then it all works. Air is really good at making decisions. If you have tortured ductwork, it's not going to get to the far rooms, or it's not going to cool the upstairs. The drinking straws, put that into, do you have enough ductwork? Is it big enough to move enough air for this to work? So I find a lot of people are surprised, they get their 4 bids and they want to just compare prices, and then I come in and I'm talking to them about these details that to me seem really critical, because right, that's what's going to make it work for you. And then people are surprised that I want to look at all this stuff that nobody else wanted to look at. So in the existing home, I'm going to be looking at what the home needs at extreme temperatures, which heat pumps match that system, and I'm not going to say, okay, we need a number, 38,000 BTUs, and then choose the next biggest system so that it covers more. I'm going to say, hey, 38,000, let's use a 36,000. I want what that heat pump delivers to fall completely in the window of so you get that full variable speed range of that equipment. Not like a furnace where you choose the next bigger size so that it covers all that footprint. And then I'm going to come up with a strategy to make sure that we have a little bit of auxiliary heat to make up the difference of what the heat pump can't do. I'm also going to say that in the world of heat pumps have been around for a long time. So our company's been putting them in for 30 years. but they've really changed in the last 20 years. So there are a lot of people who that they've had heat pumps, and I say heat pump, and they kind of cringe because the system may have been loud or it didn't perform right when they really needed heat. It was giving them lukewarm temperatures, but the equipment is improved so much in performance and the temperatures that it can give, and our climate is really pretty gentle, so it's ideal for this technology. I'm going to show some pictures of some installed systems. I chose this one because it's got it had a high efficiency furnace, which they weren't going to change. We were just adding this outdoor heat pump, but when we opened it up, it had a cracked heat exchanger, so we did end up doing a full change out. But it was just this little outdoor unit could fit in a place where it would have been really hard to come up with a traditional cube. This one also had that domino-shaped outdoor one, so there's still a nice walkway on the right-hand side. So size is a factor. I pay a lot of attention to the sound of systems, both outdoors and indoors, because there can be equipment noise and air noise. It makes a big difference of how comfortable it is to live with that system. This example I showed where they really want to do the right thing. They want to do a heat pump, but they've got an existing furnace that's downstairs in the middle of their house, surrounded by finished space. To go to a high efficiency furnace would involve changing the exhaust pipe, and there was no way we were going to make. And there also, a lot of times when you go to all electric, you need a little bit more space. They certainly didn't have that. So in this case, we keep a traditional furnace, but it has the variable speed control to run a high-end heat pump. They're going to be on that heat pump 95% of the time. So it really, I didn't go to a high efficiency furnace, but I'm not that concerned about it because you're kind of taking it out of the picture from most of the heating needs. This one is an example of they wanted to go all electric, but their panel needed an upgrade, but they also had a buried service line. So it could be where we're taking the gas usage and bringing it way down, and instead your electricity use is going to go up. Now overall you use like a third of the energy, so it's great, but you are using a little bit more expensive electricity. But we do need to think about if you have enough electricity to get you onto a heat pump. This is just this actually is an example of showing how that all-electric air handler on the right does need a little bit more room than the furnace. On a furnace, you can send the air into the bottom side of it, and with an air handler, you need to come in through the bottom. So we're really sweating the details in terms of getting which machine fits in the hole. Really practical things like that. But it's a all-electric home, a nice installation. I will finish my presentation with a version of what I call like my friends and family list. So if a good friend of mine calls and said, my furnace died, I'm looking at heat pumps, what do I need to think about? Is this contractor telling me giving me good information? So I'm going to start asking questions like these. Are they familiar with the different types of heat pumps? I get a lot of people tell me that they call out the HVAC people who immediately tell them, heat pumps don't really work around here, or the knee-jerk reaction is to try and talk them into a furnace, and I say, okay, big red flag, we're in great heat pump territory. When we want to go to heat pumps, the biggest advantage of the more advanced equipment is the ability to give you less conditioning. And so that goes back to that slide where the main goal of both the efficiency side and the comfort side is to do the conditioning with as little as possible. And so we want to be using the variable speed equipment. So if that's missing from the conversation, I'm thinking that says something. Do they do a heat load calculation? It's pretty quick and easy to do, and it's really essential. A lot of times I can guess what equipment size is going to go in there, but a broken clock is right a few times a day as well. And so that conversation should be giving attention to the insulation, windows, the building tightness, and questions about how the existing system has been working, especially in regards to different areas of the house. And I have, for testing the airflow, I have a nice tool. It's called a large vane anemometer, and it has a little propeller and some neat little doohickey. But I also have a piece of paper that does a really good job of telling me what the airflow is out of a particular register and whether it's going to be sufficient for that room. So do they check the condition of the existing ductwork? This to me sounds like the simplest thing, but I include it in my presentations because every week I find 2 houses that have ducts under in a crawl space that nobody's been in for years that are completely disconnected. So the average duct leakage in the US is 25%. So it's a really critical thing, right? We're talking about how do you get the equipment 3% more efficient when, yeah, there might be some really big things that are overlooked. And when we're talking about the output of heat pumps, it does depend on the conditions, right? So when it's warmer outside, it's easier to pull more heat in. And when it is getting colder outside, the output will drop. A lot of the equipment that I use is rated for cold weather. We don't really have cold weather. It translates to ridiculously high efficiencies. But I still need to be comparing what that equipment can do to what the house can deliver and come up with a strategy for the backup heat. And that's my last one is, what's the strategy for backup heat? So hopefully that list helps. Hopefully this overview gives you an idea of what, how to think about choosing a heat pump for your house. And right now, as soon as the cold snap happens each year, then I'll be booked out a month or so. Right now that hasn't happened, so I'm pretty available, and I'd love to, see your houses and hopefully kind of dial in a specific thing that could work for you. That's what I got.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very nice. We appreciate it. One question. Excuse me. Did someone start? Go ahead.
It was just a different conversation.
That is, you said rather than building more capacity in heating, you would cut that back. But then you also mentioned auxiliary heat, which I would think per BTU would be less, or cost per BTU would be less efficient to have a big one plus a little one. Why not just fulfill the full requirement with the big one?
So when I want to be able to use the full range of that variable speed equipment. So if I have to go up a size, if I want to oversize to be able to cover 100% of load with the heat pump operation, then I lose a good portion of that variable speed range. And when I size it properly, a lot of times we're just the amount of additional heat that's needed is really small. So a lot of people already have maybe a fireplace or some other little bit. What is normal in an all electric system is to include a little bit of electric strip heat, and so it does use a lot of electricity for 4 days out of the year, some very small amount. So it's better to, and also if we want to go up in size for the heat pumps, now we really need a lot of ductwork, usually more ductwork than people have in their existing homes. And because I focus on trying to get the heat pumps to work for existing homes, I'm going to be really mindful. There are a lot of homes where I go into and say, you know what, it'd be nice to have a 3.5 ton system, but you only have the ductwork for 2.5 tons. But you're still going to be better off putting in a nice performing heat pump, and then maybe you'll have 2 weeks out of the year where you have to run a little bit more backup heat. Does that answer your question?
I think, yes, thank you.
And so when you have, on a note on the backup or auxiliary heat, if you have a hybrid system where you use a furnace in conjunction with a heat pump, you're using it's absolutely a heat pump system. You're running almost all the time on the heat pump, but there'll be some of the time when the heat pump just isn't bringing in enough heat or it's not going to heat sufficiently. In that case, the heat pump just stops working and hands the baton over to the furnace. In an all-electric system, the heat pump still delivers plenty of heat, and it might be doing 2/3 of your heating at the coldest time, and then you bring a little bit of supplementary strip heat, so just electric resistance heat like a toaster or hair dryer, making up that difference. But you're still primarily on a heat pump.
So that electric strip heat, is that something that's in a specific room, or is that integral to the?
That's just built into the system, and so they'll, the electrician wires it in, and you don't. There's no manual. It just happens in the background that you're. And so that also brings me to a detail of what we call a crossover temperature. Like at what temperature did the heat pump stop working and the other system take over, or is more additional heat needed? And there's no really practical way of finding that. At my house, I have a hybrid system, and I wanted to really know my exact temperature, so I just shut off the gas valve. And turns out at just under 20 degrees, that's when I started to say, you know what, heat pump's not doing a great job. So I knew exactly what my crossover temperature is at my house. But it's gonna, and I can do a calculation. And also, when those crossover temperatures are a little bit high, you want the crossover temperature to be as low as possible. But there's also not a huge impact when our average winter temperature around here is 46 degrees. So even with a 35 degree crossover, you're still getting the vast majority of the work done with the heat pump.
In a hybrid system, you need the heater, the furnace, and the heat pump to be the same brand.
They don't have to be the same brand. I'm not, so when I look at if somebody has a recent furnace and they say, you know what, I want to add a heat pump to this, then about 5 years ago there was a rule change about which blowers types were used in furnaces, and so the furnaces have blowers that use about 1/5 of the energy as they did prior to that. So I'm really looking only to match up with a more recent furnace. This isn't something where we say, you know what, the furnace that's already on its last leg has been in there for 20 years, I'm going to just add a heat pump to it. In that case, I'm always saying, no, this is going to be a complete change out.
So the refrigerant that circulates around, what is that? Is it a fluorocarbon or?
Yes, so the refrigerants they are all changing. And so there was a big change from a refrigerant that was terrible for the ozone to one that was not as bad for the ozone, but still terrible for global warming. And now we're switching to a whole variety, and it's a big mess because all the manufacturers are going different directions. Some manufacture, like I'm a carrier dealer, so they're choosing one that's going to meet the next round of requirements, and some are going to an interim one, and they'll have to change again. And so for a service side, it's a nightmare. And the trade-off with the newer ones is that there's some flammability, but they are. And the important thing is these are pressurized systems that should get some attention to make sure that that refrigerant doesn't leak, because a batch of leaked refrigerant is equivalent to like driving for a year. It's really bad for the environment. But it should be all kept and captured and not released when you do the work. It's something that you want to work with a reputable company that's doing the right things.
In a couple of years, this will be settled or technology or?
Yeah, it's happening.
I was just going to ask, I have this Energy Trust of Oregon handout here, and
Yeah.
it has says something about extended capacity heat pump. What's an
Yes.
extended capacity heat pump?
That's their fancy way of saying stuff that's on their list for the best performing equipment. And it translates to if you go to an all-electric system, so this is most applicable for people that have medium to smaller homes where I put in a lot of ducted mini-split systems. There's a $650 incentive for stuff that's on that. list. Extended capacity, there's a lot of stuff that's called cold weather, cold climate heat pumps. There are these tiers of equipment. There's so many acronyms for how this stuff is rated. You know, SEER ratings that relates to cooling, HSPF relates to heating. We can go down a whole rabbit hole on the federal tax credit. They take 5 of those different acronyms, and if you meet all these numbers in the different categories, then it's an EEC1 category equipment. It translates to, do I get the $2,000 tax credit or not? So I do all of this technical stuff on the equipment, then I look at the house, and then I look at the whole, okay, which specific group of equipment gets me the money. And so we have to kind of look at it from all different sides to come up with, and really, there are some trade-offs in this with the sizing, with the, I want to give you the information so that it's your choice so you can make an educated decision. It's not up to me to decide what you want. That's my goal.
I had a HVAC installer tell me that our house is built in '51. The heat registers are in the center of the house, and the returns are towards the outside along the wall.
Yeah,
For the most
we're
part.
probably originally an oil system.
So he's telling me that heat pump wouldn't work that well because it doesn't move the airs, mix the air as well. So you're going to have more of the heat in the inside. In the wintertime, it's going to be warmer in the inside and colder.
I do a lot of those houses with that type of style, and I like that there's a lot of return air. I like that there's generally bigger ductwork because the oil systems just relied on gravity, so it can work really nicely actually. When you have a typical furnace is delivering 120 degree air, whereas this heat pump might be 95 degree temperatures, and so with lower temperatures we need to move more air to get the same amount of heat in the space. I'm just looking for sufficient, enough air. In an older house, if you have multiple stories, that's where I run into a lot of issues where I say, you know what, this isn't going to heat upstairs, and maybe we put in a ducted mini split that works for your downstairs, and we put a supplemental something upstairs. There's a lot of things to address that are really house specific, but I wouldn't make a blanket statement at all about, hey, the heat pumps aren't going to work for this house.
I think he wanted to sell me an air conditioner.
A lot of people are really attached to which systems they want to sell to people.
Is there any difference in the overall humidity between a heat pump system and say a gas or an oil furnace?
Yes. So these systems give you the ability to control your humidity. So what you have on the indoor piece of these heat pump systems, the coil, is a radiator in a box. So it's V shape or A shape, and so it's cold metal when you're doing the cooling side of things, because you're trying to blow the hot air past it and have the heat jump. So if you have the hot air from in your house that has humidity in it, and you're running it across cold metal, so it's like a soda can in the fridge, that the moisture will stick to it. And so if you have long run cycles, if you're running at a very low level and have the air moving across it, then that gives the time for that moisture to accumulate and drip out and be removed, so you're dehumidifying your space. If you have an oversized air conditioner or heat pump, and so they haven't paid attention to this, or it doesn't have that range, then you have the air rushing past it, it cools it on the temperature side, but it does nothing for humidity, and it gives you that icky, clammy, cold feeling. And so it's really critical to, the variable speed system.